Can you tell me a little bit about some of the security roles that you're seeing out in the field right now, and maybe what they do more specifically?
Yeah, sure. So I have seen a number of people at a number of different companies doing different types of security roles, and I'm happy to chat about this. This is only my perspective. Obviously, different people think different things, but I think this is an important thing to talk about because when I was in school, I was trying to learn lots of security stuff, but I wasn't exactly sure, out in the real world, what are the different job titles, like what are people doing, what skill set and knowledge maps to what type of job, even what's out there. So I'm going to give you an overview of a couple of different types of jobs and types of companies that you can do security professionally. So the first one, we've already talked about this a little bit, but security consulting, which is what I do, which is essentially you work at a firm with lots of security people who then get paid by other companies to come in and essentially try to hack their stuff and to find as many bugs as possible so that you can say, hey, this web app or this network or mobile app has this vulnerability, this is the impact, this is how it would be exploited, and here's our recommendation for how to fix it to keep users safe. So in this role, you are learning, depending on the firm, stuff about web applications and networks and mobile app and maybe even hardware and crypto as well. And because you're working with a bunch of different companies, you're also seeing many different tech stacks. So even in a couple of different weeks or over a period of months or years, you can see massive applications built using Ruby on Rails or Django or Java or C and C++ or native applications or things like that. One thing that's very cool about security consulting is you also learn about different roles and different security teams within other companies. So when you work with, say, the big companies that you've heard of and that everyone uses their products, you get some insight into how does this code actually work and who's working on them and what's the culture like. So oftentimes people do security consulting for a few years and then they get poached by another company that's often one of their clients who then is like, hey, you've done good work for us, why don't you do that all the time and we'll pay you more money to do it. So it's a cool way to see a lot of technology very quickly and to gain a lot of experience very quickly.
When you do the consulting, you're working with 4 companies and they may have a lot of different, like you said, application networks and things like that are tied to whatever you're testing there. Do you work with other members of your team who may be more knowledgeable on, say, the network part of the stuff, or is that something that's still like you have to have that knowledge of networking to complete like your job, or are you working with a team, I guess?
Yeah, generally you're working with a small team. Any security consulting firm that's worth its salt is not going to send someone in who's very junior to do a very hard project. Everyone wants people to succeed. So generally what happens is when you first start out, you'll be on projects as a shadow, which is you're doing all the same work, but we're not charging the client for your time. Instead, you're just there basically to provide additional eyes and additional value while getting trained up to speed. So generally, there is a sort of a tech lead who is the lead person on the project who is responsible for making sure that you get good coverage of what you're looking at and that the deliverable that you write up. Generally, at the end of a penetration test, you give a report, which is like a PDF that says, here's everything we found, and here's our methodology, and things like that. So yes, generally it's, when you first start out, you're shadowing projects to try to learn, and then you are on projects with more senior people who can mentor you, and there's also many people in the company that you can reach out to either on chat or via email to basically get mentorship and to learn as much as possible. So generally it's a very supportive, friendly environment because everyone's super excited about security and excited that you're wanting to learn more too. So it's very collaborative.
Awesome. That's really good to hear. That's good knowledge to share. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
people like that. They like to know that they, even if they get thrown into it, which they won't really, but they have other people that they can rely on, and that the people are willing to share information. I've told my viewers before, like a lot of the older people who work in this field, who maybe have a lot of knowledge and things like that, are very hesitant to share some of that. I don't know, have you ever experienced that, where you work with somebody who just doesn't want to share their knowledge?
I don't know if I've ever worked with anyone who specifically doesn't want to share their knowledge. I will say in security there are maybe some few small, sort of the vocal minority of people who are kind of like security curmudgeons. They have a lot of experience and they're basically jerks about it. They don't really want to help people and they think they're better than everyone. There are some people like that, but I would actually say that's a very, very small percentage. Almost 95% of people that I've met who are very good at security and very, very knowledgeable are happy to take the time to explain something and to help people. It's actually a surprisingly positive community. I think some people think that because there's a few people who are a bit arrogant and jerks that it represents everyone as a whole, but very, very few times have I met someone who's very, very, very good and not also very nice. So people as a whole are very welcoming.
Good. Yeah, that's really good to hear. It's really good to share also. I don't know, so many times I get questions on, or people comment and say like, this person's a jerk, they don't want to share anything, and is this how it's going to be like always, and things like that. So that's like perfect, and that might guide people more towards security just based on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hope so. And I will say, so a lot of that positivity is when you already know someone or they're like a friend and there's sort of a personal connection. I will say if you're asking a question online, whether it's on GitHub or some forum, I have a quick tip for you to make it more likely that they're going to actually respond and that they're going to be nice about it. So this is something that I always try to abide by, and I think other people who do this as well tend to get good responses online. And there's probably a lot of other people who have better insight than this, but something I found useful is when I post on a open source project, when I file a new issue, like, hey, it doesn't work in the way I'm trying to use it, or how do you use this? First, I always express appreciation that the person has taken the time to build this thing which I'm using, because obviously that takes a lot of their personal time probably, and it's nice to show respect that both they did this that you're using, as well as thank them like for their time, right? Like you're essentially saying, hey, spend some of your time to help me. So recognize that and make that explicit. And then next, when you have a specific issue, take at least 1 to 2 or 3 hours to try to diagnose like where exactly is the problem and what is going wrong, and also what do you want to happen. So it's like appreciation, thank you for doing this and thanks for your time. Here's specifically the issue I'm having. Here's in detail what I've tried. Because one time I see people post on issues all the time, like, hey, this doesn't work, and then there's no detail. How is the author going to reproduce this? What is your environment? What operating system, what version of the tool are you using? What language, like if it's a Python script, what version of Python are you running? And basically give them as much information and context as you can so that the amount of time they have to spend is as little as possible. So ideally, you do all the upfront work such that someone who has this domain knowledge of how this thing works can see all the information and then know like, oh, it's probably this line of code in this file. And so it takes them 10 minutes instead of them having to tease out over a series of either message board posts or comments on the GitHub issue, what exactly do you mean? Basically, minimize their work by doing as much upfront time as possible. And when I've done that, I usually get responses relatively quickly, and they're very nice about it. So I will say, as much upfront time and effort you can do to make the person who's trying to answer your question make their job as easy as possible, you're more likely to get a response, and it's more likely to be a nice response.
Right. Yeah, I always say thank you like multiple times. And like the initial thread that I'm making, asking for help, and then say that, I appreciate your time looking into this, or appreciate everyone's time, things like that. And I always tend to get good responses from that because it just shows that yes, you're asking for help, you're reaching out, and you do appreciate that. And then everybody who comments, like I respond back to and say thank you. Whether their feedback is good or not, I say thank you for your feedback. I find that generally helpful, especially in this space.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great practice to go by. And yeah, again, just making it clear, these are the steps I've tried. Like make it clear that I've tried to solve my own issue and I wasn't able to, but here's say 2 to 4 things I tried. Because oftentimes the person, if you don't list that, they'll say, oh, have you tried this? And like, you should just do that before they ask. And when you demonstrate that you've tried to solve things already, they're like, oh, this person cares and they've made an effort. They're not just blindly asking for help as soon as they get to a problem. They're actually trying.
Right.
In the worst case, you don't want to have the person responding to your question have spent more time than you have spent asking it.
Right. Yeah.
Because if that's the case, they're probably not going to answer. I mean, I would probably consider, like, if I had a popular open source project, you get a number of issues every day, and the people who clearly don't even care and don't make any effort, it's just a big time suck on these creators and maintainers.
Right.
So just be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. 100%. Thank you.
Okay, so I was about to talk about the different roles in security. So we talked about one of them.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's okay, because those are all good questions. So security consultant, you are brought in as an external party to a company to try to test them and find security bugs so that they can improve. Conversely, there's a title called like a security engineer, which is you are essentially internal to a company. Say you're working at Google or Facebook or wherever, and you are employed by that same company. You're not an external party, and you're either building internal tools or you're working with development teams to try to help them code more securely, build tools to find bugs early, and maybe build libraries that make it easier to do the secure thing. So there are, sometimes companies do have internal, they call it red teams, which is essentially you are offensively trying to break the security of other parts of the company. Maybe you're even sending crafted phishing messages to try to test the awareness of people internally and see how susceptible they are.
I did that at my last job. That was not my primary role, but one of my primary roles is we use KnowBe4, who's actually here. I don't know if you're familiar with them. But yeah, that's what, we set up fake phishing emails and we send it out to the users and then we train them, based on their click rate and things like that, if they actually did click on it and things like that. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, It's like, all right, I'd like, warm up, like, all right, who's going to click on the link today, and sometimes I make them like really hard, like fake Facebook message or something to their email, and it's like, well, you guys shouldn't be getting Facebook messages to your work email, so if you're clicking on it, good, but we'd go through a whole training process with them too, which is really awesome. Sorry,
nice.
I didn't mean to.
No, that's really fun, and we actually do that a bit as well. Sometimes companies will hire us to do like phishing campaigns for them and things like that. But yeah, so that gets onto like another area of security, which is social engineering, which is essentially you are trying to convince someone to either click on a link or install some program or maybe provide their credentials by posing as someone or something you're not. So this can be done over the phone or via email or various things like that.
Yeah, that's one area that I've always thought about getting into, especially when we started using this company doing these things. I was like, how easy it would be to set up like a fake domain and a fake website that looks identical to what we have now and really try to see how our users interact with it, and make a few things like obvious, maybe. But that's what I want to do. I was like, all right, I can buy like a fake domain that's like one letter off or something, and nobody's going to really notice it. I bet you like 90% of our users won't even notice that it's like misspelled or something's not lined up right or something, and they click on the page and ask for credentials or something like that. And they wouldn't let me do it though because it's too hard. I'm like, well, this is the kind of stuff that's out there and that people want to do to steal your credentials and steal your information, and it's easy to do. And I was like, you realize I could set this up in an hour's time where it looks, I could register the domain that's a letter off or whatever, set up the fake site, and it's out there, and all I have to do is email you, and that's all it takes. I think that's all it takes nowadays for people to essentially start looking to do bad things. But making sure that users are educated is huge, and I don't need to get on another thing here.
Education is very important. Yeah, and what you're saying, yes, the barrier to entry is definitely super low, and this is something organizations have to be very aware of. Because if you really want to get into an organization, it doesn't take a lot of time and a lot of effort to do these things. So it is something people should be aware of for sure.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't share that.
No, it's
that's the kind of things like that I think of, because like I'm really like I want to test everybody as much as I possibly can. And I was like, let me make some phone calls. Like, let me pretend to be somebody from the IT team that they've never heard of, and say, hey, I need your credentials. Let me see if they do it. And like, the last company was like, no, we're doing this email stuff. That's all we need to do. I'm like, that's not all we need to do. Like, we're a hospital. Do you understand how critical this is? Do you understand how easy it is for somebody to pick up the phone and pretend to be one of us and say, hey, we're from the IT team, and there's a problem with your account. Can we get your username and password? People would do it. No, we don't need to do that. Yes, we do.
Yeah, but that intuition you had about, can we think about this from another angle, or what are the edge cases that we haven't considered already? That's classic, like really good security thinking. So if someone out there is thinking like, oh, I see this system is designed to work this way, I wonder if I can make it do this.
Right.
That's basically the core of security, which is understanding what are the expected rules of a system, and can we try to get it to do something that the authors didn't intend.
Right.
Technically you're allowed to do it, but it's not what they intended. Right.
Yeah.
So that subversive thinking is really at the core of security. Like, over time you learn the technical details, but really being able to think from weird angles is a lot of security.
Yeah.
I think one way that I kind of describe security to people who don't have a security background is, a lot of people have a friend who they play board games with, who often does things that aren't technically against the rules, but is just really annoying and unfair, such that they win. You strictly read the rules and you're like, well, technically you're doing this thing that's not explicitly against the rules, but the authors of the game didn't intend it, and you're being a jerk and it's unfair. And because of that, you don't want to play with them.
Right.
So basically that, but applied to computers, is security.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure. That's awesome. Again, I'm sorry. It's like whole thing.
No, that's okay. We'll clover
Social engineering.
it back.
So, all right, that's where we left
Yeah.
off. Sorry.
So we've talked about security consultants who are assessing security as a third party, and then security engineers who are trying to make security better from the inside. There's also people who internal to a company who do more network security, so they're making sure, are we hardening all the servers that we're putting out there? Are we updating all the packages so that we are not using old insecure versions? They're making sure that the network is laid out in a way that, say, the development environment where lots of things are in flux is separate from, say, the corporate environment where people's laptops and machines are, which is separate from the production environment, which has all sensitive user data and things like that. So securing the network topology, some people work in that. We talked about reverse engineering a little bit ago, which is taking a compiled program and trying to find bugs in it, or trying to figure out how it works, even though you don't have the source code. So some people do that professionally, but they focus more on taking programs that might be malicious, so they might be malware, and then figuring out how they work and what they do. So there's various antivirus companies, or say government agencies, where people professionally figure out what malware does and how does it work, so that they can essentially build signatures that find this malware before or immediately as soon as it gets into your system. There are people who try to find exploits, like exploit development. They try to find bugs in commonly used software, and then they either have some tools that companies can buy that they can essentially test their resilience against previously unknown bugs, or perhaps they sell these bugs to nation states, which is not great, but this is a job that exists.
Right.
And there are like a subset of people who are like cryptographers and things like that, but it takes a lot of experience and years of study to be at the cutting edge of that, but it is very important. So I guess I am discouraging people from going into this. Personally, I'm not, I don't know all of the esoteric details about cryptography, but I think it's very important. It's just a huge amount of work to learn enough to become useful.
A lot of math involved.
A lot of math involved.
Yeah. A lot of people ask, like, do I need to know math to work in IT? And it's like, well, not entirely. It depends on where you want to go,
Yeah, I'd say you need to be analytical, but not necessarily mathematical,
right?
If that makes sense.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Being able to think very rationally and sort of algorithmically about things, but not necessarily knowing, differential equations or things like that.
That makes sense. anything else that you want to share or anything you want to touch on? Or?
So I mentioned a number of different types of job roles and areas of security, but a lot of people ask me about this, especially friends of mine who have been trying to get into security or have now gotten into security, and so I've told a number of people these things, but I haven't yet taken the time to specifically write down, here's everything I've seen and here's what I've learned. But I plan to do that soon because it seems like a lot of people care about this and I want to share it with as many people as possible. So I'm going to write this blog post in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to send it to you so you can put it in the show notes. So check there. But yeah, I hope to write a number of posts about, hey, you want to get into security? What resources are good? Where do you spend your time? Which aspects of security, or if you want this type of job, this type of experience might be useful, and things like that.
Yeah, when you start doing that, if you have time, I'd love to have you back on, do like a Skype type of thing or something like that, and have you talk about it for a few minutes, and then
I'd be happy
plug
to.
it and push it and stuff like that. So that'd be really cool. I know lots of people will be interested in that for sure. It's definitely really good knowledge that you've shared so far, and I know you can share a lot more. So
I'd be happy to.
Awesome.
So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. It's at Clint Gibler, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So
I'll put links in the description so you guys can go to his Twitter and everything else that he's kind of talked about and mentioned. We'll make sure that you guys know. There have all the info in the description. Click on it and go and visit. So I really appreciate you being on. And
thanks so much for inviting me.
I think everybody else will appreciate this as well because this was really, really informative, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for your time.